The way I will explain the oral history project is students' investigation in their communities to really connect with the small business owners in their communities to hear them out. What are their struggles and the things they are thriving, and how can the community and like the local or federal government help them to succeed in their business.
I will explain our project as researching inequalities around small shops.
During the pandemic, you're like locked up in your room and you're doing your work and you don't really get to talk to people. I've never spoken to anyone that far away.
We met with group members from Cairo, and we went over each of the questions, came up with some of our own, kind of edited the ones that we already had, and made the questions fit for both parts of our projects.
It was fun brainstorming together the different questions and angles that we would want to take for the interviews and research phase.
We were required to conduct research interviews and transcripts for each university to use. This allowed us to be able to compare the built environment of our shops in both New York and Cairo.
On the transcript, it was a little bit cringy to have to go through and like see everything and like have to hear my own voice. So that was nice.
We actually communicated with our partners from New York, and we saw how they reflected on their visits and how we reflected on our visits, and we even answered each other's reflections to see how we think, how we experienced, and how it all went.
Another issue that we did have was understanding of foreign culture. However, by the references provided by our CUNY peers, whether they were visual, audio, or written, we were able to understand everything we needed to.
When we were researching New York, a lot of the social aspect was really clear. It wasn't really, you couldn't really see it through the internet. So I feel like a lot of the first-hand research, along with our first-hand research, was a very important part of the project. We started off with a research phase where we had to really figure out like what different things these spaces needed.
Experiential learning was key to our understanding of downtown and different inequalities present and cultures around our small stores. We got to know their owners or caretakers more personally to get an insight and make a connection between each store.
One of our favorite days would be the day we presented to the shop owners our findings and analysis, and we found and we saw them proud, and we saw their happy faces, and realizing that we were not wasting their time, and instead we wanted to do something.
This project for Gutman, it connected New York City's history and the way it was built, and kind of connected it to what's going on now and how certain businesses are doing based off of prejudice that are built into where they are and the neighborhoods that they were built in.
Intriguing thing I learned from our interview process with Thomas was how he really created a community bond between himself, his business, and the community.
It kind of connected us a little bit more with our neighborhood.
I feel like it was a good experience interviewing my family, because I want to bring honor to my country and my family, and like support businesses that Mexicans and like my family created, and like engrave their names in history.
My family is also Mexican. We come from Mexico. It brings pride to know that how like people who came from Mexico to America still thrive as they always would be, and how they continue fighting on with the pandemic and other events that happen.
Hi, I'm Sama Allah. So I have this personal experience and exposure because I had this kind of protective childhood in a way, if that makes sense. Like I see certain things. I was in a protective family, so you don't get to see the kind of exposure that I got introduced to in this course. So when I got to downtown and I saw my country, my people, I'm like, oh my God, I was so isolated. And it felt quite interesting and amazing from a personal perspective. Things are not as happily bubbly as one would grow up to be.
New Cairo definitely like it focuses a lot on a lot of villas and small native communities, while in downtown Cairo, it's more collective, I think. And also it's inclusive. Yeah. Spaces are far away from each other. Downtown Cairo, it's a mixed area. It's very inclusive to different socio-economic status people. And while New Cairo, it's more for people who own cars and gated houses or compounds and villas. The whole process was very experiential. Like it felt really weird that we kind of felt like tourists in our own country at first because there was so much that we didn't know, and there was so much that we were so blinded by what we've grown up to see, and most of us were very sheltered. So I feel like this was the most interesting part, like really connecting with the nature of the space and how it grew to become what it is today. Okay. We also had to go at different times of the day. In the morning, some streets are very quiet, and it's complete opposite in the night. Also, weekdays versus weekends. Cairo downtown in the weekends it's so tough in the traffic, and there are a lot of people. Like you really there are some places you can't go because there are too many people. But the dynamic is very different of the weekday and versus the weekend. And I feel like the experience overall was very grounding because we got to deal like with such a diverse community, and we really did get close to many of them because we had to visit like multiple times to really understand the social patterns around the area.
Through the interviews and our analysis, we can see that there are similarities and differences of the inequalities faced by the shops in both of the cities. The commonalities are the income inequalities, the regulation of market and the institutions, and the representation for development. For New York, we can see that there is social and economic exclusion. Also, there is discrimination. In Cairo, we can see that there is gender inequality. Women do not feel safe in the streets.
We figured out that there's a lot of male dominance in many places, and we experienced how these places could be a little bit frightening or a bit annoying to us while going around. How men are throwing words and harassment. So yeah, it was different because we didn't do this on such a big scale before. We went around the whole downtown Cairo. We're not used to this place. Most of us are not used to it, and it was more about mapping the behaviors and what we feel and the senses and everything we see. Plus, I also wanted to mention, since we're at university most of the time and about the whole grounding experience, that being in downtown Cairo in such a cosmopolitan, mixed sort of city, we really got to experience the inequalities ourselves. Okay, we're all girls, so going to downtown Cairo and walking alone late at night, we experienced lots of the inequalities that we wouldn't experience on campus, for example. So we didn't just research like with numbers and statistics, we really got to empathize with how people feel on a daily basis, which really helped us to come up with design solutions and realize how big of a problem this actually is.
Both in Cairo and New York City, small business owners and employees have faced a struggle regarding COVID-19, both financially and socially, where some business owners have to close their business.
During COVID pandemic, many small businesses were facing crisis and difficult times. Based on the interview from two countries, I noticed they all wanted to see like the safe community and people taking care of each other.
A lot of the small businesses in New York got really hit hard during the pandemic, especially like immigrant small businesses and like Black-owned small businesses. They really got hit harder than anyone else.
I knew that a lot of people didn't get loans from the government, a lot of people didn't get money from the government, but it was surprising to see that like if they were going to get money, it was just going to be in the form of a loan, which is just upsetting, especially given the fact that the government gave a lot of money to corporations and didn't really focus on small businesses. They were just kind of overlooked.
The government either did offer assistance or didn't to any small businesses. And if they did, it wasn't beneficial in the long term because it would just have the business end up being in more debt. Whereas if it was like a larger business, it wouldn't really put them in as much debt.
The huge businesses could pass, while the smaller ones, they had more financial problems. So with us, we have the bookstore that was institutional and one that was privately owned. So we found that when COVID hit, they were both obviously affected. A lot of shops in like downtown were affected and closed down because of the regulations that were put in place. But we found that since like the one that's institutional is funded and governmentally owned, that they weren't put under as many restrictions as the privately owned business. The government assistance that they had and the funding they had, they were able to continue and not shut down for as long.
So the COVID situation didn't just affect it financially, but also it affected the trust that people had. I mean, the quality of food. People stopped trusting, am I going to go eat outside? So this was another factor that was added to their choice of how they deal with their food. Of course, the health factor affected it completely. And even after the COVID by a little while, like nowadays, the function of the restaurants itself changed regarding the COVID situation.
I also can relate to this as a deli worker. We actually shut down the whole deli. Until now, we're still not making sandwiches or anything because of this. Is like the trust. Even if you wear in a mask and have gloves on, people still prefer to cook in the house, and that's like it had the big impact into the to the store financially.
I believe based on like a central idea or common theme of this whole oral history project is the fact that when the pandemic hit, customers, they have new ways of buying their products. They have new ways of shopping, which is, for example, online, and that benefited the big business owners because since everything can be consumed online, you don't need to physically go to the stores.
With the shift to online and the financial hardships that happened during that time, people did not care about the jewelry and the outfits and that kind of stuff. So our shops were also affected during the pandemic for this reason.
Well, it was interesting getting to know everyone and like how bodega owners or bodega employees, what they face on a daily basis and how it's more challenging now that the pandemic broke out, how they have to stay on hand with the mask enforcement, making sure everyone stays 6 feet apart, everything is sanitized.
The small businesses, it was extremely hard for them to keep up with a lot of the COVID requirements, especially that there are some customers who just like straight out would refuse or get upset, or they would just altogether lose business. It was extremely hard for them to rebuild. A lot of people just weren't cooperative with the guidelines. And that was just like something that was really difficult. The small businesses, if they weren't cooperative and they got caught, they would just get fined for money that they didn't have. So it was kind of a lose-lose for them.
Rules and regulation keeps on increasing and being more like restricted to the point where there is misunderstanding and miscommunication in the community, because when these small business owners implement these policies in their stores, the consumers that come in, they feel like they are being like how you say treated in a way that they don't used to it. Some of that leads to confrontation between the customers and the business owners.
Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching.
شكرا على المشاهدة.
Muchísimas gracias.
Nuari tampaindenga.
Hello, everyone. We're very excited to be sharing this experience with all of you. We are Group 1, focusing on social anchors in New York and Cairo, presenting in this virtual GSAC Student Conference of 2021.
Yeah, I'm Mariam.
I'm Yola.
And Leila and Jana will be joining us through different platforms. Our first interaction with our group from New York was through a simple icebreaker exercise where we uploaded videos on Slack that told the story behind our name.
Experience took off with a virtual exchange lecture from Dr. Sam at CUNY, who introduced us to our project and contextualized New York's culture. Simultaneously, Dr. Mu'min gave a lecture to our peers at CUNY. At this point, we were discussing predisposed stereotypes for both cities, diving into our research so we'd have something to reflect on by the end of the semester. Our first site visit to start getting to know downtown Cairo and projects of Ismailia group was really heartwarming. There was a contrasting feeling that we were tourists because we didn't know a lot of what we saw and all that was happening, but it instantly felt like home. At this point, we were introduced to SDGs and looked closely at SDG 10, which focuses on reducing inequalities. As our research progressed, we began to compare inequalities present in both New York and Cairo. Experiential learning was key to our understanding of downtown and different inequalities present and cultures around our small stores. We got to know their owners or caretakers more personally to get an insight and make a connection between each store. We got the opportunity to present our research and conclusions we reached to the shop owners in downtown Cairo and hear feedback from them directly to further assess what we needed to tackle. Concurrently, we were exchanging the information gathered with the CUNY group on platforms such as Zoom, Slack, and Docs in parallel to our own research. The transcripts and ongoing discussions helped further understanding New York and helped them understand Cairo as well. The questions in the slide were used to guide our research and design thinking. Many readings were also coupled with this to enhance and contextualize our learning. We mainly focus on the solutions that fall under the umbrella term of tactical urbanism, which means fast, low budget, and realistic. So, in reflecting on this whole process, we created this timeline with everything we've explained so far. Normally, we face challenges throughout the process, like time difference. However, we were able to overcome it through using platforms where each person can reflect on another's ideas at their own convenience. Another issue that we did have was understanding of foreign culture. However, by the references provided by our CUNY peers, whether they were visual, audio, or written, we were able to understand everything we needed to. We also need to give a lot of thanks to Dr. Mu'min and his team for being our mentor throughout this whole process, whether it was inside or outside of the classroom. We went from learning basic interview etiquette to formatting final posters. So it is safe to say that this was an extremely fruitful semester, and we're excited to see further progress and the final outcome. We included a link to our project in the index if you would like a more in-depth understanding of what we've done through our research, transcripts, and more. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Nadine from Group 2. Today we're gonna take you through our journey that we went through so far. So we're gonna introduce you about the icebreaker exercise, the professor exchange presentation. Then we're gonna talk about the SDGs 10, our site visits, transcript reflection, vision, and our reflection at the end. This is how we used to communicate and break the ice between the two groups. First using Slack, then we went with the WhatsApp to be more friendly with the group. This is our presentation with Professor Sam. It was it's a nice pleasure to meet Dr. Sam for the first time. He talked about the inequalities in New York and Cairo and the challenges we met during our experience in Cairo. To introduce you about our theme is food and beverage. We're gonna talk about the history of food, food and place, the relation between food and transportation, the relation between people and food, and the different kitchen types, and finally, health relation with the food. Our first visit was Filfila. The place wasn't too crowded. The staff was very helpful. Even the manager was very helpful with us too. The place was since 1959. Then different experience with the Kushri Abu Tariq. The street was very crowded and the place was hectic.
Hi, my name is Jana. So the next restaurant we visited was Kairoma, and this gave us an experience between Cairo and Rome, and it felt like a very modern European experience. And the place was very cozy and gave us a feeling that we're sitting in Cairo, but we're actually eating in Rome. The next restaurant and last restaurant or cafe was the Cafe Riche. where it was such a nice experience, and we were very surprised by the amount of the actors and the old poets and stuff that used to go there and sit there and go do poetry, and they had like meeting days for them, and it was a very nice experience. Next, these are some of our street sketches around the areas of Filfila and Cafe Riche and Kairoma. Next are the food services types that were included in each restaurant. So first off, this was like the assembly line where the first person does a task and hands it to the next person to do another task, and the tasks keep adding on to each other. This is a normal kitchen space, the normal restaurant type. And lastly, this is what the food trucks usually do. Next is the health analysis, where we viewed the experience of food in the Fifth Settlement, which is a very modernized area, versus downtown Cairo, which is like the old downtown Cairo. And surprisingly, the food in the Fifth Settlement had a lot more calories than the ones in downtown. This is like the behavioral choreography of the people living in downtown, what they wake up to do and how they end their day. The SDGs in Cairo showed that the poverty rate isn't what we imagined actually, but there's a bit of hunger. And these are a couple of pictures illustrating the examples that we had covered in the SDGs. Here also on the right, you will find the SDGs in New York and the issues they face, with some illustrations to show these ideas.
Okay, we kind of did a Venn diagram to see how these inequalities are shared between downtown and New York, and we saw some similarities and differences. Next, we looked at the strengths, weaknesses that we have in our SWOT analysis in Cairo, and we also looked at it in New York to try to see where is the strength in each area, how is it related, what's the difference. In here, the shop interviews and transcript reflections, where we actually communicated with our partners from New York, and we saw how they reflected on their visits and how we reflected on our visits, and we even answered each other's reflections to see how we think, how we experienced, and how it all went. This is the Consulate workshop that we visited in our very first trip in our semester. It was very exciting, very interesting to see the place in the beginning. This is kind of our vision that we want to reach, hopefully, which making a connected, homogeneous community. To finally reflect on our experience overall, we think that it was very motivational to see how the shop owners want us to actually make a change. And even though we were scared, it actually went very smoothly, very well, and we're very excited to do an amazing job.
Hi everyone, my name is Habiba Shukri. I'll present along with my colleagues Malak, Maged, and Justina. Okay, so since the semester is coming to an end, we would like you to hop on our journey with this AUCX Uni Exchange. We'll highlight the icebreaker as a starter, moving on to the SDGs and inequalities downtown Cairo analysis, and redesign finalizing by New York analysis, and our overall reflection of this collaboration. The icebreaker exercise was actually very interesting because it kind of left room for us to know the different personalities in the group and get a peek of their stories, one of which are quite funny. After that, we have the professor exchange lecture, which was exciting yet crucial, so that we would get to know the collaboration from New York partner perspective. We discussed inequalities in New York and downtown Cairo, and Professor Sam briefed us about the whole process. We found that common factors like race and social class was common in both cities. However, other inequalities were more prominent in downtown Cairo, like the idea of not being sufficiently considerate to people with disabilities. So moving on to another milestone, which was our meeting with the CUNY group. It was fun brainstorming together the different questions and angles that we would want to take for the interviews and research phase. It was actually quite interesting getting to know our group members from CUNY over the different platforms we use like Slack, WhatsApp, and Zoom. And coming to my personal favorite part of the whole process, it would actually be the site visits. Whether doing it individually as a group or doing it with the whole class and instructors team, it was really an eye-opening and exciting experience because we got to see downtown Cairo in a new light. This might seem strange because most of us are Cairene born and raised. However, touching on the hidden spots in downtown Cairo and realizing its potential and history was definitely a new experience for us all.
The SDG 10 stands for Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is about reduced inequality. It is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the UN to be achieved by 2030, among other goals. The inequality we're representing is about time. In the case of downtown Cairo, as time evolves, the need for change and adaptation also increases. And while some shops opt for evolving with the new time and era by orienting themselves towards a more up-to-date style, other shops prefer to not change their style and stay true to their vintage identity. This creates the inequality between the two due to people's tendency to go more towards the newer shops. Likewise, in New York, time creates the pressure of developing with change among globalization and big store chains. Now to start off with our downtown Cairo analysis, our thesis statement is Old Still Gold, where we studied and analyzed the issue of modernization, change, and time to know if old things are still being appreciated. To get a better understanding of the area, we studied the history of the place and noted the urban tissue pattern and how it was created and modified over the years. The study of the user profile allowed us to get to know more about the dwellers of the area, for example, their age group, occupation, economic status, behavior, and location. This was particularly important as to be able to design, we must first understand the users and the space. The SWOT analysis provided us with the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the space, which is also useful for the redesign model and to understand the area better. In this poster, we studied the behavior of the people on the site and how it changes from day to night. We also analyzed the different types of activities available. We concluded that downtown Cairo has a lot to offer for everyone with diverse activities during the day and night. Here, we analyzed the passageways of downtown Cairo and concluded that they are important in making interconnections in the city. For the first shop, we have Surya Mustafa, which is an eyeglasses shop that sells vintage eyewear and prefers to not go with the flow of modernization. They have their own clientele and style. For the second shop, we have Atif Wasif, which is a jewelry shop that also has its own clientele and is more in favor of modernizing and staying up to date with people's needs and evolving accordingly.
The redesign part, we have 4 images that shows different processes that we went through in design thinking process that helped us redefine passageways in downtown Cairo based on the site observations and the shop owner vision. New York, we have, as for New York, we have the neighborhood and immigrant rate maps and the crime rate map. It shows that the part, the Ozone part, which our bodego is in, has an average crime rate. Our Mexican bodego is in an area that is crowded. As you see below is a picture of the bodego in the past. It shows how it was didn't have that many shops surrounding it as we see it today. Then the part, the reflection part. In each phase, we had mixed feelings that mainly included being worried, excited, challenged for what will be our outcome. Being part of a global community was an overwhelming yet exciting at first. As time went by, we realized that this idea of exchange gave us exposure to different people and people from different backgrounds, which was inspiring. One of the things that we were worried about was how we are going to coordinate with the different time zones, but then we found out that it was worth it. One of the things was also connecting with the shop owners and developing this kind of relationship with them is what really stand out for us. We discussed with them how they ended up in the shop and the history of the shop. One of our favorite days would be the day we presented to the shop owners our findings and analysis, and we found and we saw them proud, and we saw their happy faces and realizing that we were not wasting their time, and instead we wanted to do something and we wanted to develop on something. Also, one of the main factors that helped us overcome the semester was the help of our professors and the whole TA team. Thank you.
Hi, we are one of the AUC teams, and our names are Rana, Eleanor, Aya, Habiba, and Salma. This is our presentation on the AUC and CUNY exchange. We communicated with the CUNY team through Instagram and Slack. We also sent each other short icebreaker videos. In addition, we had professor exchange lectures. In these lectures, the outcomes were to comprehend the nature of each course and understand how both groups will be beneficial to one another and collaborate. We were required to conduct research, interviews, and transcripts for each university to use. This allowed us to be able to compare the built environment of our shops in both New York and Cairo.
And to further study downtown Cairo, we visited the site and conducted interviews with the owners and employees of some bookstores, where they told us about the history of their stores as well as the site around them. The interviews we conducted, along with the CUNY students' interviews as well, allowed us to come up with base maps that show traces of behaviors, movements, and sensory experience through the journey between the bookstores. And then we could come up with the SWOT analysis and the needs assessment to create some vision for the place.
Through the interviews and our analysis, we can see that there are similarities and differences of the inequalities faced by the shops in both of the cities. The commonalities are the income inequalities, the regulation of market and the institutions, and the representation for development. For New York, we can see that there is social and economic exclusion. Also, there is discrimination. In Cairo, we can see that there is gender inequality. Women do not feel safe in the streets. Also, we lack ADA consideration in our street design.
We then had the opportunity to present our work in front of the shop owners, where they gave us their feedback and suggestions, which we were able to take into consideration while coming up with the intervention. Taking from the feedback of the jury, we began to design phase 1. Our idea is to transform the numerous passageways that already exist in our site into hotspots where people can gather, read, and interact. By including exhibition spaces, seating areas for book club meetings or study groups, and in some cases, a staging area for readings or presentations, we can create a different, more exciting experience and pathways that are otherwise abandoned or not efficiently used.
Also, we're going to be reflecting on CUNY and the Gotham and students' transcripts. There has been divided into 3 parts. The prose, there were detailed transcripts and interesting exchange of knowledge and a multicultural or global exposure, which was kind of beneficial. There has been quite challenges like time difference. Of course, the different majors meant that we had different outlooks and different kind of discussions. Also, the different paces of our courses because of our different majors. What can be improved for further collaboration is to include more icebreakers and to have these kind of exchange knowledge checkpoints for both universities to submit or work on a similar goal per week or month, and to encourage more engagement and of course to have fun. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.